Woodcutter. The woodcutter provided timber for homes, carts, and firewood. Armed with axes and saws, they worked long hours in forests, often alone. A dangerous but vital job. One wrong move and a falling tree could kill. Without them, the village froze, starved, or stalled. Constable. The constable enforced law at the local level. They broke up fights, caught thieves, and dragged drunks to the stocks. Not a soldier, but not quite a civilian either. Just enough authority to be feared, or ignored, depending on the day. Bowyer. Bowyers made longbows from yew, shaping deadly weapons for war. Accuracy and tension were everything. A weak bow could cost lives in battle. Essential during conflicts like Agincourt, their craft faded with the rise of gunpowder. Miller. Millers ground grain into flour using water or wind-powered mills. They took a cut as payment, leading to constant suspicion of theft. Trusted for their skill, distrusted for their scales. No bread without a miller, but no shortage of gossip either. Swineherd. Swineherds raised and managed pigs, often in dirty, remote pastures. It was lonely, messy work, but pork was valuable. They fed the village, provided fat for soap and candles, and smelled terrible doing it. Carter. Carters transported goods using horse or ox-drawn carts. Grain, timber, barrels. If it needed moving, they hauled it. Muddy roads, broken wheels, and long distances made it rough work. Without them, nothing reached the market or mill. Armourer. Armourers forged helmets, chest plates, and gauntlets for knights and soldiers. Precision was key. Bad armour meant death. Their workshops were hot, noisy, and full of sparks. Every clang of the hammer could save a life or end one. Nuns lived in convents, devoting their lives to prayer, education, and healing. Some were noble-born, others escaped marriage. They copied texts, cared for the sick, and taught girls, all under strict vows of obedience and silence. Herald. Heralds announced royal decrees, organised tournaments, and identified knights by their coats of arms. In war, they delivered ultimatums. In peace, they read the law aloud in town squares. Part messenger, part master of ceremonies. Watchmen. Watchmen guarded the village at night, patrolling streets or towers with lanterns and horns. They watched for fire, thieves, or attacks. If something went wrong while everyone else slept, the watchman was the first to see it. Bailiff. The bailiff managed the manor for the lord. He collected rent, oversaw farm work, and kept villagers in line. A mix of accountant, manager, and enforcer. Unpopular but powerful, and always watching. Fletcher. Fletchers made arrows by hand, attaching feathers to wooden shafts and sharpening steel tips. In times of war, they worked non-stop. A steady hand meant accurate shots. A slip meant a wasted arrow. Priest. The priest led religious life in the village. He baptized, married, buried, and preached, often in Latin, which few understood. He collected tithes and kept souls in check with promises of heaven or threats of hell. Shepherd. Shepherds watched over flocks, guiding sheep to fresh grazing lands. Isolated, exposed to weather, and always alert for wolves. Wool was wealth, and their job was to protect it on two legs. Leatherworker. Leatherworkers crafted boots, belts, saddles, and more from tanned hides. Their work was essential for travel and war. Smelly, hands-on, and full of cuts, but always in demand. Cooper. Coopers built barrels, buckets, and tubs, vital for storing beer, grain, and salted meat. Every shape had a purpose. Their wooden hoops sealed trade, survival, and storage in a world without plastic or glass jars. Almoner. The almoner distributed food and coins to the poor, usually on behalf of the church or monastery. Charity with a purpose, helping the needy, but also reinforcing religious duty and social order. Knight. Knights were elite warriors, sworn to a code of chivalry. They fought on horseback, trained since childhood, and wore armour that cost a fortune. In war, they led charges. In peace, they managed land or sought glory in tournaments. Thatchers roofed homes with straw, reed, or heather. A good thatch kept the rain out for years. A bad one meant wet beds and complaints. Fast hands, balance, and weather knowledge made or broke the job. Squire. A squire served a knight, carrying weapons, caring for horses, and training for battle. One step below knighthood, it was long hours, hard work, and a front row seat to bloodshed. Ditcher. Ditchers dug trenches for drainage, boundaries, or defence. Muddy, exhausting work with little pay and zero prestige. But without proper ditches, fields flooded and roads washed away. Scribe. Scribes copied texts by hand, recorded legal documents, and handled correspondence. In a mostly illiterate world, their writing preserved knowledge, law, and power, slow, precise, and often done in candlelight. Templar Knight. Templars were warrior monks, protecting pilgrims and fighting in the Crusades. Rich, secretive, and feared, they blended faith with warfare, until kings turned on them and burned them at the stake. Tanner. Tanners turned animal hides into usable leather. The process stank, literally. Urine, lime, and rotting flesh made tanneries foul places, usually built far from town. Nobody liked the smell, but everyone needed the leather. Steward. The steward ran the lord's household and estate in his absence, oversaw servants, meals, finances, and guests. A trusted right hand or a dangerous rival, depending on ambition. Mason. Masons cut and placed stone for castles, churches, and walls. Skilled, respected, and often mobile, they built the structures that defined the medieval world. One wrong cut, and the whole wall could collapse. Gong farmer. Gong farmers cleaned out cesspits and latrines, usually at night. The work was filthy, dangerous, and surprisingly well paid. Falling in was a real risk, and sometimes fatal. Abbot. The abbot was the head of a monastery overseeing monks, land, and wealth. A powerful figure, both spiritual and political, with influence that rivaled local lords. Brewer. Brewers made ale, the everyday drink safer than water. Often women called alewives, they brewed in small batches at home. Bad ale meant illness. Good ale meant repeat customers. Blacksmith. Blacksmiths forged tools, weapons, nails, and horseshoes. Their forge was the heart of the village, full of fire, smoke, and clangs. Strong arms, hot metal, and constant demand kept them busy year-round. Lord. The lord owned the land, collected rent, and held power over everyone on it. He settled disputes, hosted feasts, and owed loyalty to the king. Wealthy and feared, unless he lost favour or failed in battle. Glazier. Glaziers made and installed glass, especially stained glass windows in churches. It was precise work with fragile materials, rare in villages but in high demand for cathedrals and noble estates. Baker. Bakers made bread daily in communal ovens. They followed strict rules on weight and price. If a loaf came up short, they faced public punishment, or worse, suspicion of witchcraft. Monk. Monks lived in monasteries, spending their days in prayer, study, and manual labour. They copied books, brewed ale, grew herbs, and stayed silent for long stretches. A quiet life, but often a powerful one. Bishop. Bishops oversaw multiple churches and held major influence in both religious and political life. They crowned kings, owned land, and sometimes led armies. More palace than pulpit, their power was immense. Tailor. Tailors made and mended clothing for villagers and nobility. They worked with wool, linen, and sometimes silk. Fashion meant status, and a skilled tailor could quietly shape both. Reeve. The reeve was elected by villagers to manage daily affairs and report to the lord. They organised labour, monitored harvests, and enforced rules. A peasant with authority, often resented on both sides. Potter. Potters shaped clay into bowls, jugs, and tiles, firing them in smoky kilns. Every home needed their goods. Fragile but essential, they turned mud into something that lasted. Archers trained from childhood to master the longbow. Their arrows could pierce armour at distance and change the course of battles. Cheap to train, deadly in numbers, feared on every battlefield. The Hayward protected crops and fences, making sure livestock didn't trample fields. They carried a staff, patrolled borders, and fined offenders. An early form of rural law enforcement. Wheelwright. Wheelwrights built and repaired wooden wheels for carts and wagons. Precision was everything. One bad wheel could stop a journey cold. Without them, the village stood still. Falconers trained hawks and falcons for hunting small game. It was a noble pastime, requiring patience, skill, and leather gloves. A well-trained bird was a status symbol and a deadly partner in the field. Minstrels were travelling performers who sang songs, played instruments, and told tales. They entertained at feasts, fairs, and castles. Gossip, history, and humour all came through their verses. Part news, part nightlife. Ploughman. The ploughman guided oxen across fields, breaking soil to prepare for planting. It was hard, slow work that determined the village harvest. Without a good ploughman, no seeds, no crops, and no bread. Bell founder. Bell founders cast massive bronze bells for churches, towers, and town halls. The process was hot, loud, and required perfect timing. One flaw in the mould, and the bell cracked. A costly disaster.